The blizzard had already swallowed most of the mountain by the time the police convoy reached him. A lone man stood in the snowdrift, motionless against the storm, a Navy SEAL who'd gone off the grid years ago. When they ordered the K-9 to take him down, no one could have guessed what would follow, a reunion that would shatter hearts across the frozen valley. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, subscribe for more powerful stories of loyalty and bravery. Snow fell thick and steady over the quiet mountain town of Ironwood, Montana, blanketing the pine roofs and the frozen roads in a white hush. The wind howled through the narrow pass leading into town, where the sheriff's convoy inched forward, headlights cutting through the storm. Sheriff Dean Callahan, the 45-year-old brown-haired lawman with a lined face and steady eyes, kept one gloved hand on the wheel as the radio crackled beside him. He'd been called out to strange things before, but never this, a report of a man standing alone near the ridge in the middle of a blizzard. The dispatcher's voice came thin and nervous. No coat, no vehicle, no ID. Dean squinted through the flurries. There, barely visible, stood a lone figure near the drop-off, a man unmoving despite the cold, his head bowed slightly as though he were listening to something beneath the wind. Deputy Alyssa Moore, the 30-year-old red-haired officer sitting beside him, muttered under her breath, "Who in their right mind just stands out here?" Dean didn't answer. He eased the cruiser to a stop, the tires crunching over packed snow, and stepped out into the freezing air. The stranger didn't flinch as the headlights washed over him. He was tall and built like someone used to carrying weight and responsibility, wearing a dark jacket that hung stiff with ice. His hair was short, dark, flecked with snow, his face weathered but calm, the face of Ryan Hale, the 38-year-old Navy SEAL who had gone missing 3 years ago after a classified mission overseas. Dean raised a hand in greeting. "Sir, this mountain's not safe in weather like this. You need to come with us." Ryan's pale blue eyes flicked toward the sheriff, but didn't move otherwise. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and rough, like gravel underfoot. "I'm waiting for someone." Alyssa frowned, pulling her jacket tighter around her shoulders. "Out here? You'll freeze to death." Dean exchanged a glance with her, something uneasy in his gut. The man wasn't trembling. He wasn't even shivering. He stood like a statue carved out of the storm itself. Then, from behind, another set of headlights approached through the curtain of snow. A second patrol SUV, this one carrying Officer Karen Holt, the 34-year-old brunette K-9 handler with sharp eyes and a commanding tone. She stepped out first, her breath visible in the cold, and opened the rear door. Out leapt Rex, the black and tan German shepherd, a K-9 built of muscle and instinct, his fur dusted white by falling snow. "That him?" Karen called, her voice cutting through the wind. Dean nodded. "That's him. He's not talking much." "Doesn't have to," Karen replied, unclipping Rex's leash. "We'll see what he does." Ryan's gaze shifted slightly at the sound of claws on ice. The dog began to prowl forward, ears high, posture ready, eyes locked on the unmoving man. "Easy, Rex," Karen said softly. But Rex didn't seem aggressive. He was confused. He slowed halfway there, nostrils flaring, his body trembling. Dean noticed it too. "You seeing this?" Alyssa whispered. Karen frowned, giving the signal again, firmer this time. "Advance." But Rex didn't. The big dog took a hesitant step, then stopped entirely. His tail flicked once, and then he sat down, head tilted. Karen blinked in disbelief. "That's not possible. He's never disobeyed a command in 2 years." The man in the snow, Ryan, finally lifted his head. The light from the SUVs reflected in his eyes, and for a heartbeat, Dean thought he saw something ancient in that stare, a kind of calm sadness that made the storm itself seem quieter. "Rex," Ryan said softly. The dog's ears shot up. Karen froze. The name fell into the wind like a memory pulled from another life. "Rex," Ryan repeated, voice trembling just slightly now. The shepherd whined, a low, broken sound, and then, without waiting for any order, bounded forward. Karen shouted, "Rex, heel!" But it was too late. The dog crashed through the snow and pressed himself against Ryan, tail wagging furiously, whining in short bursts that sounded more like cries. Ryan dropped to one knee, burying his gloved hands in the thick fur, his voice breaking apart. "You're alive, boy, after all this time." The officers stood frozen in disbelief. Karen's face had gone pale, her breath shallow. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Rex was rescued from a base explosion overseas. His handler," she stopped, eyes flicking to Ryan, "was listed KIA. Dean's mind raced, pieces clicking together too fast to grasp. "You're saying this man's the handler?" Ryan nodded once, not looking up. "He was mine. We were hit in Kandahar. The blast threw us apart. They told me he didn't make it." The wind wailed across the ridge like a ghostly echo. Alyssa pressed a hand over her mouth, watching the dog lean harder into the man's arms, as though afraid he might disappear again. Dean took a slow step forward. "Mr. Hale, Ryan, right? We need to get you both out of this cold." Ryan finally looked up. His expression was unreadable, but his tone was quiet. "There's a storm coming, worse than this one." He glanced past them toward the black expanse of pine and mountain behind the ridge. "You shouldn't stay here." "We can talk about that in town," Dean said firmly. "You're lucky to be alive. We'll sort the rest once you're safe." Karen crouched near the dog, still stunned by his behavior. "Rex, come." The dog didn't even twitch an ear. He stayed pressed to Ryan's side, one paw resting on the man's knee, as if reclaiming something he'd never expected to find again. Dean motioned to Alyssa. "Get the blankets and radio dispatch. Tell them we're bringing in 2. As she turned back toward the SUV, the snow began to thicken again, swirling in sheets. Somewhere deep in the storm, a long, low rumble echoed. Not thunder, but something heavier, something from within the mountains themselves. Dean's instincts prickled. "Let's move fast," he said. Ryan's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "It's not just weather," he murmured, almost to himself. "Something's coming." They bundled into the vehicles, the warmth of the heaters slowly fighting the cold. Rex refused to leave Ryan's lap. As they drove down the winding road into Ironwood, the lights of the small Montana town flickered below, a scattering of gold in an ocean of white. None of them spoke. In the quiet, the only sound was the steady breathing of the man once believed dead, and the soft whine of the dog who had found him again, against every odd the world could offer. The snow kept falling as the convoy wound its way into Ironwood, Montana, where the lights of the town shimmered through the storm like faint candles behind fogged glass. The streets were mostly empty at this hour, except for the plows that moved in slow, steady passes and a few bundled residents hurrying home. Sheriff Dean Callahan, the 45-year-old brown-haired lawman, parked in front of the small brick sheriff's station near the frozen square, its wooden sign creaking in the wind. He stepped out first, followed by Deputy Alyssa Moore, the 30-year-old red-haired officer, and Officer Karen Holt, the 34-year-old brunette K-9 handler who kept glancing between Ryan Hale, the 38-year-old dark-haired Navy SEAL, and Rex, the black and tan German shepherd who hadn't left his side since the ridge. The quiet was thick when they entered the station's lobby, the old heater rattling to life as Dean brushed snow off his shoulders. Behind the front desk sat Nora Wilkins, the 52-year-old gray-haired dispatcher with a mug of stale coffee and a blanket over her knees. Her eyes widened as she looked up. "Lord above, Dean, what have you dragged in?" Dean exhaled, shaking his hat. "Long story. Get some hot water going, will you?" Nora's gaze landed on Ryan, and though she didn't recognize him, something in the man's expression, the weary stillness, made her voice soften. "Kitchen's still warm," she said quietly. They moved to the back room where an old stove glowed faintly. Alyssa filled a kettle and set it on while Karen guided Rex toward the corner. The dog refused to move far from Ryan, his head resting against the seal's boot. Dean leaned against the table, studying the man. "You mind telling me what exactly you were doing up there? No vehicle, no pack, not even gloves worth a damn." Ryan stared into the steam rising from the kettle, his voice low. "I wasn't trying to be found." Dean frowned. "Then you picked the wrong mountain. You almost froze to death." Ryan didn't answer. Alyssa broke the silence as she handed him a cup. "You said something back there about a storm worse than this one. What did you mean?" Ryan looked at her for the first time, his eyes distant. "Something's wrong up there. The mountain doesn't sound right." Karen scoffed softly. "Mountains don't sound right? You talking about an avalanche warning?" "Not that," Ryan said, his tone flat. "There's movement in the canyons. Echoes don't return like they used to. It's hollow in places it shouldn't be." Dean exchanged a look with Alyssa, half concern, half confusion. "You been out there long?" "Long enough," Ryan murmured. His hands, scarred and raw from cold, tightened around the cup. Nora poked her head in. "Dispatch says the highway's closing by dawn. Weather Service is calling it a once-in-a-decade storm. Power crews are pulling in from Missoula." Dean rubbed his jaw. "Figures." He turned back to Ryan. "Well, until this clears, you're not going anywhere. You can stay at the station or the old lodge by the river. Your call." Ryan nodded faintly. "The lodge." Karen crouched near Rex, who had barely blinked since entering. "He still won't listen to me," she said, her tone a mix of awe and frustration. "It's like he forgot I exist." Ryan's gaze softened slightly. He didn't forget. He just remembered something stronger. The words hung in the air. Alyssa watched the dog lean into Ryan's leg, eyes closed, a picture of loyalty. "You two must have been close," she said quietly. Ryan gave a small nod. "You don't go through what we went through and come out strangers." A distant rumble shuddered through the walls, faint but unmistakable. Dean straightened. "That thunder?" Nora frowned. "Sky's clear enough for stars between clouds. That wasn't thunder." Another rumble followed, deeper this time, rolling up from the direction of the mountains. The lights flickered once. "Probably a snow shelf breaking," Karen said, but her voice wavered. Dean looked toward Ryan. "You said something's wrong up there. You care to explain that?" Ryan hesitated, his jaw tightening. "You wouldn't believe me if I did." Dean stepped closer. "Try me." Ryan set down his cup, steam curling between them. 3 days ago, I picked up a distress beacon on a scrambled frequency, the kind used by old field units. It came from near Hollow Point Ridge. That's restricted land now, but I went out anyway. Found what was left of an old comms outpost buried under snow. Looked like something had torn through it. No tracks, no heat signature, but pieces of equipment were missing. "Missing?" Alyssa asked. "Taken by who?" "That's the thing," Ryan said. "Whatever it was moved uphill against the wind." Dean frowned deeply. "You think someone's up there, in this storm?" "Not someone," Ryan said softly. Rex lifted his head suddenly, ears pricking toward the window. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Karen reached instinctively for his collar, but he ignored her. Ryan looked at him sharply. "He hears it too." The sound came a moment later, a faint rhythmic hum, like machinery muffled by snow. Dean moved toward the door, unholstering his flashlight. "Stay here." But before he could reach the handle, the lights went out entirely, plunging the station into darkness. Nora gasped. The only illumination came from the dull orange glow of the stove and the small beam of Dean S. flashlight cutting through the room. "Power grid's down," Alyssa said, grabbing her radio. "Backup generator should kick." She stopped as static filled the channel, sharp and erratic. Dean clicked his light toward the window. Snow was blowing harder now, but beneath it, faint and unnatural, flickered a distant blue light in the direction of the ridge. Ryan rose slowly, his expression unreadable. "That's not the storm." Rex barked once, low and guttural, then bolted toward the door, claws scraping wood. Karen called after him, but the dog pushed through before she could stop him, disappearing into the night. Ryan was already moving, grabbing his jacket. "He's going toward it." Dean cursed under his breath. "You can't go out there, not in this." But Ryan was already halfway through the doorway, swallowed by the snow and wind. Dean motioned to Alyssa and Karen. "Flashlights now. We're not letting him freeze or get lost." The three of them stepped into the storm, the wind cutting through their coats like blades. The town below was dark, every window black. The only sound was the crunch of boots and the echo of distant barking, fading into the mountain. Ryan moved ahead of them with impossible steadiness, his silhouette barely visible. Each time Rex barked, Ryan seemed to change direction slightly, as if following an invisible thread through the storm. "He's going straight for the ridge," Alyssa shouted over the wind. Dean struggled to keep his footing. "Then we better find out why." The cold bit at their faces, and the snow fell thicker still, swallowing ironwood behind them until only darkness and the mountain remained. The wind screamed through the trees as Ryan Hale, the 38-year-old dark-haired Navy SEAL, trudged forward through waist-deep snow, his boots crunching over the frozen crust. The beam of his flashlight cut through the white chaos, catching glimpses of the mountainside, jagged rocks, skeletal pines, and swirling flakes that blurred the world into a moving fog. Behind him came Sheriff Dean Callahan, the 45-year-old brown-haired lawman, his breath coming in sharp bursts, followed closely by Deputy Alyssa Moore, the 30-year-old red-haired officer, and Officer Karen Holt, the 34-year-old brunette K-9 handler, gripping her flashlight with numb fingers. The storm howled harder as they climbed, following the faint sound of barking that rose and fell with the wind. "Rex!" Karen shouted, her voice nearly swallowed by the blizzard. The dog's reply came faintly from ahead, a single bark that echoed off the canyon walls. Ryan didn't hesitate. "He's moving toward Hollow Point Ridge," he called back, his voice steady despite the cold. "We're close." Dean struggled to keep pace, his flashlight flickering. "If this keeps up, we're turning back before we freeze to death." Ryan glanced over his shoulder. Then, "You'll never find what's calling him." Alyssa frowned, shielding her face with her arm. "Calling him? You mean that light?" Ryan didn't answer. The blue glow ahead pulsed faintly through the snow like a heartbeat in the dark. It seemed to draw them forward, every flicker accompanied by a faint vibration underfoot. Karen felt it first, a hum in the ground, low and rhythmic, like a buried machine stirring beneath the mountain. "Dean," she said, her voice tight, "you feel that?" Dean slowed, his boots crunching to a stop. The sound was faint but undeniable, a deep mechanical thrum beneath the storm's howl. "Yeah," he muttered, "I feel it." Ryan crouched, brushing snow away from a half-buried shape near the ridge's edge. His gloved hand struck metal, a panel, half-frozen in the ice, covered in snow and rust. "Military-grade composite," he murmured. "Not new, not from this decade." Alyssa's eyes widened. "You're saying this was built here?" "Hidden here," Ryan corrected. "We used similar panels in covert listening posts overseas. This one's older." He brushed away more snow, revealing a small latch. The hum grew louder. Suddenly Rex, the black and tan German Shepherd K9, burst out of the darkness, fur caked with frost, barking sharply toward the ridge beyond. Karen dropped to her knees, relief washing through her. "Rex, what were you—" The dog growled, ears pinned back, eyes fixed on the snow-covered metal. Ryan met Dean's gaze. He found the entrance. Dean looked down at the panel, then at Ryan. "Entrance to what?" Ryan pressed the latch. It didn't move. He leaned closer, studying the seams where the snow met the metal. Something buried deep. Maybe old command storage, maybe worse. The ground beneath them shuddered again, more forcefully this time. Alyssa stumbled, grabbing Dean's arm. "What was that?" The rumble turned into a crack as snow slid from the ridge in sheets. Ryan grabbed her by the jacket and pulled her back, just as a section of ground gave way, revealing a hollow space beneath, a tunnel mouth framed by steel supports and darkness. Cold air poured out like a breath from the earth. The blue glow flickered brighter below. Dean swore under his breath, "We're not equipped for this. We need backup. We need—" But Ryan was already moving, lowering himself toward the opening. You can call for backup when we know what we're dealing with. Karen shouted, "You can't just go down there?" Ryan paused at the edge, his expression unreadable. Something down there's active, and whatever it is, it's not supposed to be. He disappeared into the dark. Rex barked once, then followed without hesitation. Dean cursed again but motioned to Alyssa and Karen. "We're not letting him vanish down there alone. Stay sharp and keep your lights on." They descended carefully, their boots clanging against frozen steel steps, leading into the tunnel. The deeper they went, the quieter the storm became, until all they could hear was the drip of melting ice and the low hum vibrating through the walls. The tunnel opened into a chamber, wide, circular, and lined with equipment long dead and covered in frost. Wires hung like vines from the ceiling, and consoles blinked with dim blue lights that shouldn't have had power after so many years. Ryan moved slowly across the floor, sweeping his flashlight over old insignia painted on the wall. U.S. Army Communications Node, Hollow Point Station. "I thought this place was decommissioned in the 80s, Dean muttered. "It was," Ryan said quietly. "Which means someone reactivated it." Alyssa shivered as her light passed over something in the corner, footprints in the dust, not old, leading deeper into the tunnels. "Someone's been here," she whispered. Karen's hand tightened on her sidearm. "Maybe survivors from that outpost you found?" Ryan shook his head. "No. The pattern's wrong. Too deliberate. Someone wanted to be seen." The hum grew again, accompanied by a faint rhythmic beeping from one of the consoles. Ryan approached it cautiously. The screen flickered, showing static and faint text. "Signal detected," it read. "Source unknown." Dean stepped closer. "Can you read it?" "Trying," Ryan said, adjusting a dial. The beeping accelerated, and the blue glow pulsed brighter, washing the room in ghostly light. Then the screen flashed white, followed by a single word. "Awakened." The console went dead. The floor trembled beneath them, dust falling from the ceiling. "What the hell does that mean?" Alyssa shouted. Ryan looked toward the far wall where a heavy blast door sat half open. Beyond it, faint lights flickered. "It means someone, or something, turned this place back on," Rex growled low, moving toward the door. Karen's voice shook slightly. "Ryan, what do you think is behind there?" He hesitated, hand resting on the frame. "If I had to guess, something that was never supposed to see daylight again." The hum deepened into a rumble. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the door, a metallic sound echoed, slow scraping, deliberate. Dean raised his flashlight, his voice taut. "Everyone stay close. Whatever this is, we're not leaving without answers." They stepped forward together, the shadows swallowing their light, as the snowstorm raged unseen above them. The blast door creaked open with a sound that cut through the silence like tearing metal, revealing a corridor half-collapsed and lined with frost. The light from Ryan Hale's E-Bulway flashlight glinted off shards of ice, hanging like teeth from the ceiling. Ryan, the 38-year-old dark-haired Navy SEAL, stepped forward cautiously, his breath visible in the dim blue glow that pulsed deeper within the tunnel. Behind him came Sheriff Dean Callahan, the 45-year-old brown-haired lawman, gripping his revolver with steady hands, followed by Deputy Alyssa Moore, the 30-year-old red-haired officer whose flashlight trembled slightly as she swept it across the walls. Officer Karen Holt, the 34-year-old brunette K-9 handler, walked beside Rex, the black and tan German shepherd, whose low growls echoed ahead of them. The deeper they went, the warmer it became, the air thick with the scent of oil and metal, out of place in a facility supposedly abandoned for decades. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the soles of their boots. Dean whispered, "What kind of place is this?" Ryan didn't answer immediately, scanning the ceiling where pipes dripped with condensation. A listening station would have had power lines, satellite uplinks, storage. But this? He trailed his light over a reinforced wall where the paint had peeled to reveal symbols stenciled beneath. Unit 7, Research Wing. Alyssa frowned. "Research? For what?" Ryan looked at her briefly. If I told you half the things the government experimented on during the Cold War, you wouldn't sleep again. The air buzzed faintly with static, and Dean S. radio crackled to life for the first time since they lost contact with town. A distorted voice broke through the static. Nora Wilkins, the 52-year-old gray-haired dispatcher. "Dean? Do you copy?" Dean pressed his shoulder mic. "Go ahead, Nora. We hear you." Her voice came faint and warped. Power grids flickering. Something's drawing heavy current. The lights in half the town just surged. "What's going on up there?" Dean looked toward Ryan, who shook his head slightly, motioning for silence. "Nothing to worry about yet," Dean said, though his tone betrayed doubt. "Keep the backup generator running. We'll report in soon." The radio hissed and cut out. They moved deeper until the passage widened into a chamber, unlike the first, larger, cleaner, almost new. Banks of monitors lined one wall, some still flickering weakly. Thick cables ran across the floor toward a central structure, a glass cylinder nearly 10 feet tall, filled with a faintly glowing blue fluid. Inside, vague shapes moved slowly, too blurred to define. Karen's voice was barely a whisper. "What is that?" Ryan stepped closer, sweeping his light across the glass. "Containment. Some kind of biological unit." Alyssa's stomach twisted. "You mean alive?" "Was alive," Ryan corrected. "Or supposed to be." He placed his gloved hand on the control panel beside it. The screen flickered on, showing a schematic labeled Subject H9. Data scrolled down the screen in faded green text, vitals, genetic readouts, timestamps ending abruptly in 1987. Then, at the bottom, a blinking line. Status: reanimated. The group froze. Dean's eyes narrowed. "Reanimated?" Alyssa whispered. "As in alive again?" Ryan's hand hovered over the console. "As in it's not supposed to be." Rex suddenly barked, sharp and urgent, backing toward the door. The hum in the walls intensified until the lights flickered violently, and then, with a sudden pop, the containment glass cracked. A hiss of vapor escaped into the air, filling the room with a strange chemical scent that burned the throat. Dean pulled his scarf over his mouth. "We're leaving now." Ryan reached for a nearby emergency switch, but before he could flip it, the fluid inside the cylinder began to drain, vanishing through hidden vents below. Through the fogged glass, something shifted, an outline of movement, a body straightening as the last of the liquid disappeared. Alyssa gasped. "Oh my God!" The figure stepped forward within the broken chamber, human in shape, but wrong. Its skin was pale and veined with faint blue light, its eyes reflective like metal. The temperature dropped so sharply, the frost on the walls began to reform. "Everyone back!" Ryan barked, drawing his sidearm. The thing tilted its head, its movement jerky, almost curious. For a moment no one moved. Then the chamber lights exploded, plunging the room into darkness. A shriek tore through the air, inhuman and sharp. Dean fired blindly into the dark as the creature moved with impossible speed, a blur of cold wind and shadow. The gunfire echoed through the tunnels, followed by a heavy crash and the sound of twisting metal. Karen screamed as her flashlight flickered out. "Dean! Left!" Ryan's voice cut through the chaos, calm but commanding. "Alyssa! Light on me!" She obeyed, her beam catching the creature mid-motion. It recoiled from the sudden brightness, its skin shimmering like glass before vanishing into the shadows again. Rex lunged, barking furiously, his teeth snapping at empty air as the sound of footsteps retreated deeper into the tunnel. Silence fell, broken only by the heavy breaths of the group. The emergency lights flickered back to life, dim and red. Ryan stood near the shattered glass, gun still raised. "It's gone," Dean said, voice shaking. "What the hell was that?" Ryan holstered his weapon slowly. "Something they built. Something they buried." He turned to Dean. "We need to seal this place before it finds another way out." Karen looked toward the tunnel where the creature had vanished, her face pale. "If it's alive, it's heading straight toward town." Ryan met her gaze. Then we don't have much time. Rex growled softly, nose pointed toward the darkness, the hair along his spine standing straight. Ryan crouched, running his hand over the floor. Fresh prints. It's fast, but not silent. Alyssa swallowed hard. You really think we can stop that thing? Ryan's expression hardened. If we don't, Ironwood's not seeing sunrise. He turned toward the exit, motioning for the others to follow. Grab what you can carry. We're heading back topside. And Dean, call Nora. Tell her to get every armed hand in that town awake before it's too late. Snow lashed against their faces as Ryan Hale, the 38-year-old dark-haired Navy SEAL, led the group back through the tunnels, his flashlight beam cutting across the jagged path ahead. The low hum of the facility had shifted to a deeper vibration that shook the walls, a warning that whatever had been inside that chamber was now awake and moving. Sheriff Dean Callahan, the 45-year-old brown-haired lawman, moved close behind, gripping his revolver tight, even though he knew it would do little good against something like what they had just seen. Deputy Alyssa Moore, the 30-year-old red-haired officer, stumbled once on a broken pipe, catching herself against the wall, her breath visible in the freezing air. Officer Karen Holt, the 34-year-old brunette K-9 handler, followed with Rex, the black and tan German shepherd, whose fur bristled as he sniffed the air and growled low, pulling at his lead toward the tunnel mouth. They broke into the surface blizzard, the wind slamming into them with blinding force. Snow whipped in every direction, and for a moment Dean couldn't tell where the mountain ended and the storm began. Ryan's voice rose above the wind. We head straight for town. No stops, no splits. Keep your lights high and your weapons ready. Karen shouted over the storm. You think it'll follow us? Ryan didn't slow down. I don't think. I know. They pushed downhill, the snow nearly to their knees now. The forest around them creaked and groaned under the weight of the storm. Every sound, the snapping of a branch, the crunch of ice underfoot, felt like something watching. Alyssa's radio crackled again, faint, through static. Sheriff's Station to Unit 1. Dean, do you read? It was Nora Wilkins, the 52-year-old gray-haired dispatcher. Dean snatched the mic. We're here, Nora. We found something in the ridge. Power's been rerouted through old military lines. I know, Nora's voice said, distant and strained. Lights in town just blew again. We've got outages on every block. People are calling about... The transmission broke apart into static and a high-pitched screech. Dean tapped the mic. Nora, say again? Nothing but white noise. Ryan glanced back. They're losing power because it's feeding somewhere else. It's drawing current to sustain itself. Sustain itself? Alyssa repeated, her voice trembling. You mean it's alive? Ryan didn't answer. The snow deepened as they crossed the clearing toward the frozen creek that marked the halfway point to Ironwood. Rex suddenly barked, ears flat, and Ryan stopped dead in his tracks. Quiet, he hissed. They listened. For a long moment there was only the sound of the wind, and then something else, faint but distinct, a rhythmic crunch of footsteps behind them. Not human, heavier, slower. Alyssa turned her light back up the slope. There's nothing there, she whispered, but her voice betrayed her disbelief. Then she saw it. The beam caught movement, something sliding between the trees, fast but deliberate, keeping to the shadows. Dean raised his revolver instinctively. Move! Ryan barked. They broke into a run, stumbling down the incline toward the tree line, snow spraying around them. Rex barked again, snapping his head toward the forest behind. The shadow moved with them, silent but massive. It wasn't chasing, it was watching. Testing. As they neared the edge of town, faint lights glimmered through the storm. The old water tower loomed above, and beyond it, the shapes of dark houses half buried in snow. Dean radioed again. Nora, anyone still on grid? We're coming in hot. Static. Then, faintly. Generators on, but something's moving in the streets. The transmission cut again. Alyssa gasped as they reached Main Street, where the snow was ankle-deep and the town eerily quiet. Shop signs creaked, Christmas lights flickered weakly along the eaves, and the only sound was the low hum of the emergency generator at the sheriff's station. Ryan scanned the rooftops. Get everyone inside. Lock doors, lights off. It's hunting. Dean looked at him sharply. Hunting what? Anything warm, Ryan said. It'll track heat, movement, sound. Karen pulled Rex closer, her hand trembling as she rested it on his head. How do you know that? Ryan hesitated. Because they trained it too. Alyssa's breath hitched. Trained it? H9 wasn't built to fight wars, Ryan said. It was built to end them. A hybrid organism that could survive cold, silence, and isolation. Designed to wait and strike years later, but it was never supposed to activate. Dean's voice was low. And now it has. A crash erupted from somewhere behind the diner, a heavy metallic sound followed by the shatter of glass. Dean spun around. Karen, inside. Alyssa, get that generator shut down. Ryan moved toward the noise, gun drawn, motioning Rex to stay. The dog ignored him, growling deep in his throat, ears forward. Ryan stopped beside the alley, his flashlight sweeping over a trail of melted snow that steamed faintly in the freezing air. The footprints were deep and wide, glowing faintly blue around the edges, where heat still radiated. He crouched, touching the edge with his glove. It was warm. A shape moved above. He barely had time to roll before a chunk of the awning came crashing down, scattering snow and splinters. Ryan came up firing, 3 controlled bursts. The light from his gunfire illuminated something clinging to the side of the building, its skin shimmering between flesh and ice, its limbs long and angular. The creature shrieked, more vibration than sound, before vanishing back over the roofline in a blur. Dean rushed forward, eyes wide. What did you see? It's adapting, Ryan said, reloading quickly. The cold doesn't slow it anymore. Alyssa ran from the generator shed, breathless. It's drawing power again. The lights flickered when you shot, like it's connected somehow. Everything's connected, Ryan muttered. The ridge, the station, the power grid. It's all one system. Karen tightened her grip on Rex's collar. So what do we do? Ryan's gaze swept the dark streets, where the wind carried faint echoes of metal scraping metal. We make a stand, seal the center of town, cut every source of heat, force it to come to us. Dean stared at him. You're talking about baiting it? That's exactly what I'm talking about, Ryan said, and we use the only thing it'll hesitate to kill. He looked down at Rex, who stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond Main Street. The dog gave a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the cold air. Ryan's voice was steady. It remembers him. That's our advantage. The wind screamed through Ironwood's empty streets as Ryan Hale, the 38-year-old dark-haired Navy SEAL, and Sheriff Dean Callahan, the 45-year-old brown-haired lawman, moved through the square, shutting off generators one by one. Each switch they flipped plunged another block into darkness, until the town was little more than a black outline against the snow. Their breath hung in the air like smoke, the silence between them filled only by the distant groan of bending trees and the low hum of the storm rolling off the mountain. Deputy Alyssa Moore, the 30-year-old red-haired officer, was stationed near the old hardware store, radio pressed to her ear, her gloved fingers trembling as she watched the windows frost over. Grid's almost down, she said through the static. One more block and we're cold. Officer Karen Holt, the 34-year-old brunette K9 handler, crouched beside the black and tan German Shepherd Rex in the middle of Main Street, the dog's breath puffing in short bursts of steam. Rex's ears twitched, his body tense as if waiting for an unseen signal. He's listening, Karen murmured. Ryan's voice crackled through her earpiece. Good. We need him ready. Once the grid's dead, it'll come looking for warmth. And us? Karen asked. We'll be right here, Ryan replied, and waiting. The last switch went down with a heavy clunk, and Ironwood fell into complete silence. The storm swallowed every sound. No lights, no hum of generators, just darkness and the rhythmic whisper of snow hitting the frozen ground. Dean checked his watch. the faint glow from its face, the only light between them. "We're ghosts now," he said quietly. Ryan nodded. "That's the point." They moved into position around the square, forming a rough perimeter with flashlights off and weapons drawn. Ryan crouched near the diner's awning, eyes scanning the rooftops. The town's Christmas decorations, once bright, now hung motionless, strings of light swaying in the wind like faint reminders of warmth that no longer existed. "You ever seen anything like that thing?" Dean whispered. Ryan shook his head. "Not in any file I had clearance for." Dean's breath came out as a white plume. "That's not comforting." Somewhere in the distance, metal clanged against metal, a single sound that echoed through the night. Rex's head shot up, a deep growl rumbling in his throat. Karen's hand tightened on his collar. "He's picking it up," she whispered. "East side, near the water tower." Alyssa's voice came softly over the radio. "Copy that. I've got movement by the general store." Ryan signaled for silence, motioning with 2 fingers toward the street. Dean took cover behind a parked truck, gun steady. The sound came again, closer this time, a scraping deliberate, like claws over asphalt. Ryan's pulse quickened. "Hold your fire until you see it," he murmured. The shape appeared at the far end of the street, tall, angular, moving with an unnatural stillness between each step. Its outline shimmered faintly blue, flickering as though caught between visibility and shadow. Alyssa's breath caught in her mic. "Oh, God!" The creature stopped in the center of the road, head turning slowly as if smelling the air. Ryan could feel the vibration in his chest, the same low hum from the tunnels now pulsing through the ground. Karen whispered, "Rex, stay." But the dog's body trembled, caught between fear and recognition. The creature shifted its head toward the sound of Karen's voice. For a heartbeat, its eyes flashed metallic silver, locking onto them. Ryan shouted, "Down!" and the street erupted with gunfire. Muzzle flashes lit the snow like lightning. The creature recoiled, its body twisting with impossible fluidity, the bullets sparking against its skin before melting into steam. It lunged, a blur of motion that slammed into the truck Dean was using for cover, sending it skidding across the icy street. Dean hit the ground hard, gasping as Ryan fired again, aiming for the head. The shot connected, jerking the creature back, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out a sound like metal tearing, half scream, half mechanical distortion. Rex broke free from Karen's grasp, sprinting toward it. "Rex!" she screamed. But the dog didn't stop. He lunged at the creature, teeth sinking into its leg. The beast twisted, lifting Rex off the ground, but instead of throwing him, it froze. For a long second, both stood motionless, the wind swirling around them. Then the creature lowered the dog gently to the ground. Ryan watched, stunned. "It remembers him," he whispered. The creature tilted its head, its body flickering between light and shadow. It took a step back, looking almost uncertain. Then a surge of energy rippled through its frame, the faint glow intensifying. "It's fighting something," Ryan said quietly. "Something in its programming." The air shimmered as a static wave rolled out from the creature, shorting out every radio within range. Alyssa's voice vanished mid-word. The lamps along the square sparked to life for a second, glowing blue before bursting in showers of glass. The creature let out another piercing cry and turned away, vanishing into the blizzard at the edge of the town. Silence returned, broken only by the ringing in their ears. Dean pushed himself up, coughing. "Is everyone alive?" "Mostly," Karen said shakily, dropping to her knees beside Rex. The dog was panting but unhurt, his fur coated in frost. Ryan knelt beside them, examining the strange blue residue left on Rex's muzzle. "It didn't attack him," Karen said. "It stopped." Ryan stared into the storm where the creature had disappeared. Something in it still recognizes loyalty. Dean holstered his gun. "So what now?" Ryan looked back at the sheriff's station, its faint lights flickering under generator backup. "Now we find out what else is buried under that mountain, because whatever's inside that thing, it's waking up piece by piece." By dawn, Ironwood lay buried under nearly 3 feet of snow, the once quiet mountain town now reduced to flickering pockets of light from generators and the faint glow of emergency lanterns. Ryan Hale, the 38-year-old dark-haired Navy SEAL, stood at the edge of the sheriff's station parking lot, the horizon behind him still dark, and the cold biting deep enough to sting through his gloves. Ryan's gaze stayed fixed on the ridge barely visible through the haze. "You really think that thing's coming back?" Ryan turned to him. "It never left. It's watching. It's trying to remember what it's supposed to be." Inside the station, Deputy Alyssa Moore, the 30-year-old red-haired officer, sat surrounded by a dozen maps spread across the conference table. She'd been up all night with Officer Karen Holt, the 34-year-old brunette K-9 handler, tracing the network of tunnels that connected the ridge to the valley. Karen rubbed her eyes, exhausted. Every old mining line, every communication shaft. It's like this mountain's hollow. Alyssa pointed at one line drawn in red marker. This one connects directly under Main Street. If that thing's still moving, it could be right beneath us. Rex, the black and tan German shepherd, lay by the stove, his eyes half closed but his ears twitching at every creak outside. The station's radio crackled faintly before Nora Wilkins, the 52-year-old gray-haired dispatcher, came through. "Dean, power grid's trying to come back online, but something's interfering with the signal again. Voltage spikes keep tripping the circuits." Dean stepped back inside, setting his cup down. "That's not the power company. It's feeding off what we're sending it," Ryan nodded grimly. "Every cable, every old relay, it's part of the organism now." Alyssa looked at him. "Organism?" Ryan paced toward the maps. "You saw how it reacted to energy. It's not mechanical, it's symbiotic. The research down there wasn't just building a weapon. They were trying to fuse technology with living tissue, make something that could evolve on its own. It's learning, adapting, remembering." Karen frowned. "Remembering who it used to be?" Ryan's eyes flicked toward Rex, or what it used to serve. Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered. A moment later, the radio shrieked with static and then cut off completely. "You still there?" Silence. Then, faintly, the station windows trembled. Alyssa turned. "Nora might still be in her post, and if that thing's heading for the main relay, we can't let it reach it." Within minutes, they were back in the snow, headlights slicing through the storm. The drive to the sawmill was slow. Snowdrifts covered most of the road, and the trees swayed under the weight of ice. The silence in the cab was heavy, until Alyssa spoke softly from the back seat. "Dean, why would the military bury something like that here? We used to have an air base up north before it closed in the 80s. Somewhere nobody would dig." Ryan's voice cut through the wind. "And they chose a town full of miners, people used to digging." When they reached the sawmill, the gate stood open, snow piled high against the fences. The wind carried a strange, low hum that set Ryan's teeth on edge. The main warehouse loomed ahead, its roof sagging under decades of decay. "Stay sharp," Dean said, stepping out. His boots sank into the snow with a crunch. The others followed, flashlights scanning the broken windows and leaning beams. Rex trotted forward, nose low to the ground, his fur bristling. Ryan knelt beside him. "You smell it?" The dog whined softly, ears twitching. "It's been here." They entered through the side door, the air thick and damp. Old machinery lay covered in frost, and the walls dripped with melted snow. The deeper they moved inside, the more they could feel it, a low vibration, running through the floorboards like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. Alyssa's flashlight caught something near the far wall. "Dean, look." Half buried under ice was a metal panel similar to the one they'd found in the ridge, cables snaking out of it into the ground. Ryan brushed the frost away, revealing faded stenciling. "Node access Jar 2. This connects to the main relay," he said. "It's the heart of the network." Dean crouched. "Can we shut it down?" "Maybe," Ryan said. "If we overload it instead of cutting it, it'll collapse the connection, but we'd lose everything. The grid, communication, heat." "We're losing that anyway," Alyssa said. Ryan nodded, moving to one of the control boxes. He flipped open the casing, revealing wires fused with what looked like living tissue, veins of pulsing blue light running through them. "It's integrated," he muttered. "Alive." Karen's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, it's growing." The tissue pulsed faster, reacting to their presence. A distant metallic shriek echoed from outside, and Rex began barking furiously. "It knows we're here," Ryan said. "Dean, get everyone behind cover." The floor vibrated as the wall nearest the entrance buckled inward, snow and splinters exploding into the room. The creature burst through the wreckage, its body flickering between human and inhuman forms, half ice, half light. Its eyes fixed on the humming relay, then on them. Dean fired first, his bullet sparking against its chest. Alyssa joined in, the noise deafening in the enclosed space. The creature recoiled but didn't fall. Instead, it lashed out with a clawed arm, striking a beam that sent debris crashing around them. Ryan dove for the control panel, shouting, "Cover me!" Karen dragged Rex behind a crate, shouting for Alyssa. "The switch, Ryan. How long?" 30 seconds, Ryan yelled, pulling wires apart and forcing them into a makeshift overload circuit. The creature let out another shriek, staggering closer. Its movement was jerky now, glitching between steps as if the conflicting systems inside it fought for control. Dean emptied his revolver and grabbed the shotgun from his belt, firing point blank. The blast staggered the creature but didn't stop it. "Now, Ryan!" Karen screamed. Ryan slammed his hand on the final switch. The entire sawmill exploded in light blue and white arcs, leaping from wall to wall. The floor heaved, sending them sprawling. Sparks rained from the ceiling, and the stench of ozone filled the air. When the light finally faded, silence returned, broken only by the soft crackle of burning wires. The creature was gone, only a trail of melted frost remained where it had stood. Dean coughed, pulling himself to his feet. "You get it?" Ryan didn't answer right away. He stared at the relay panel, now dark, the faint pulse of blue light slowly dimming. "Maybe," he said. "But if it's as adaptive as I think, it's not dead, just retreating." Karen looked at him. "Then where is it going?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "Back to where it began. He turned toward the ridge, visible through the shattered wall, the mountain now glowing faintly beneath the rising dawn. "And we're going after it." Snow whipped across the mountain face as Ryan Hale, the 38-year-old dark-haired Navy SEAL, led the climb back toward Hollow Point Ridge. The storm had grown stronger since dawn, turning the world into a white blur of ice and wind. Sheriff Dean Callahan, the 45-year-old brown-haired lawman, struggled a few feet behind him, clutching the strap of his rifle to keep it from being torn away by the wind. Deputy Alyssa Moore, the 30-year-old red-haired officer, followed close behind, her breath ragged, cheeks flushed from the cold. Officer Karen Holt, the 34-year-old brunette canine handler, carried Rex, the black and tan German shepherd, through the steepest stretches of snow, her arms trembling with the effort. The path was almost invisible now, only faint impressions of old tracks leading higher toward the ridge where it had all begun. "You sure this is where it went?" Dean shouted over the wind. Ryan nodded without looking back. "The relay's pulse leads here. Whatever's left of that thing, this mountain's pulling it home." Alyssa adjusted the strap of her pack, glancing up at the shifting gray sky. "Why come back? If it's alive, why not run?" Ryan's voice was flat. "Because that's not how it was built. It's returning to the source. To recharge, to evolve." Karen looked down at Rex, who was whining softly, ears twitching toward the ridge. "He knows something's up there," she said quietly. "He's been uneasy since we left town." Dean tightened his grip on his rifle. "I'm uneasy, too." They crested the final slope and found themselves standing before the mouth of the tunnel they had discovered nights earlier. The metal door they'd left open had been twisted inward, the hinges warped by heat. Steam curled from the entrance, rising into the cold air like breath from some buried giant. Ryan crouched near the opening, brushing his hand across the metal. It was warm. "It's active again," he said, But there's no power lines left to feed it, Alyssa frowned. Then what's keeping it alive? Us, Ryan said. Our heat, our movement. It's learning to feed off anything it can sense. They descended into the tunnel, flashlights slicing through the darkness. The hum returned almost immediately, deeper this time, vibrating through their bones. The walls were slick with moisture, and the faint blue veins they had seen before were brighter now, pulsing like arteries. "It's spreading," Karen whispered. Ryan said nothing, but his expression hardened as they reached the chamber where the containment cylinder once stood. The entire structure had changed. The walls had been reshaped, twisted by something alive. Metal and flesh had fused together into strange organic ridges, and at the center of the room, where the containment glass had shattered, there now stood a massive cocoon of glimmering ice and metal, pulsating with blue light. Dean took a step back. That thing was dead. It was evolving, Ryan said. Now it's becoming something else. Alyssa shone her flashlight on the floor, gasping. "Ryan, these aren't human footprints." The prints that surrounded the cocoon were wide and deep, each one steaming faintly in the cold air, the edges glowing faintly as though burning from within. The cocoon shuddered. A sound filled the chamber, a low rhythmic heartbeat that wasn't mechanical at all. Ryan raised his weapon. "Back up slowly!" The cocoon cracked. A long line of light spread down its surface before splintering into dozens of jagged fractures. Dean raised his shotgun. "If it moves, we end it here." But as the ice began to fall away, what emerged wasn't the same creature they had fought in town. This one was smaller, human-shaped, its features partly obscured by frost and a metal plating fused to its skin. It stumbled forward, steam rising from its body. For a moment it looked at them with confusion, its eyes no longer metallic but almost human, pale and searching. Karen gasped. "It looks like a person," Alyssa finished softly. Ryan lowered his weapon slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's trying to imitate us." The figure took another step, unsteady, then froze as Rex barked sharply. The sound made it flinch. Ryan stepped closer, ignoring Dean's warning shout. "Look at me," he said. "If you can understand me, stop." The figure's head tilted. It blinked once, then twice, as if testing the motion. Its lips parted, but no words came, only a static-laced rasp. "What is it saying?" Alyssa whispered. Ryan strained to listen. The noise was fractured, broken, but a single word took shape through the distortion. Memory. The room fell silent. Ryan took a slow step forward. "What do you remember?" The figure trembled, its hands twitching at its sides. Cold, dark, alone. Then suddenly its expression twisted in pain. Blue light flared under its skin, and the metal along its body tightened like armor. "Ryan, back!" Dean shouted, but it was too late. The creature screamed, a sound so piercing it made their flashlights flicker. The air temperature dropped in seconds, frost racing up the walls. The figure lunged, not toward Ryan, but toward the tunnel behind them, moving with desperate, almost human panic. It disappeared into the dark. "It's running," Alyssa said. "It's afraid." Ryan holstered his weapon. "No, it's warning something else." Dean's face drained of color. "You mean there's more?" Ryan nodded grimly. "It wasn't the only one. The others are still dormant in the lower levels." Karen's voice was barely a whisper. "How many?" Ryan looked toward the glowing veins in the wall, each pulse spreading outward like roots through the mountain. "Enough to bury this town if they wake." The ground shuddered again, stronger this time, dust falling from the ceiling. "It's starting," Ryan said. "They're connected to the same system that runs beneath Ironwood. If we don't shut it down now, this whole place goes with it." Dean clenched his jaw. "Then we cut the heart out of it." Ryan nodded once. "We find the central core. That's where it's drawing from." Alyssa looked back toward the entrance, her breath visible in the frigid air. "If it's deeper, how do we reach it?" Ryan glanced at her. "The old mining tunnels under Sector 9. They were sealed after a collapse 30 years ago, but if we break through there, we can reach the core directly. Dean reloaded his shotgun. Then we'd better move before it wakes the others. Ryan turned to Karen. Stay close to Rex. If he reacts, we stop. That dog's senses are sharper than anything down here. Karen nodded, brushing a hand through Rex's fur. You hear that, boy? You're leading the way now. The shepherd gave a short bark, tail low but steady. Ryan turned toward the newly opened passage that led deeper into the mountain, where faint blue light shimmered through the darkness like veins beneath skin. It's waiting for us, he said quietly, and this time it knows we're coming. The descent into Sector 9 felt like slipping into another world. The tunnel sloped steeply downward, the walls closing in as the air grew heavy and damp. Ryan Hale, the 38-year-old dark-haired Navy SEAL, led the way with his flashlight sweeping over the jagged rock and twisted remnants of old mining rails. Behind him came Sheriff Dean Callahan, the 45-year-old brown-haired lawman whose breath echoed harshly in the confined space, followed by Deputy Alyssa Moore. The 30-year-old red-haired officer clutching a map that trembled in her hands, and Officer Karen Holt, the 34-year-old brunette K-9 handler with Rex. The black-and-tan German shepherd walking low to the ground, ears pricked his growl a constant quiet warning. The tunnel was carved through layers of granite and ice, with the faint hum of energy pulsing beneath the rock. Dean muttered, "It's like the mountain's alive." Ryan didn't look back. It is, in a way. The systems they built down here were never meant to stay dormant. They used geothermal heat, magnetic conduction, and living cells as organic processors. This mountain is its brain. Alyssa frowned, her flashlight beam trembling. You're saying it's thinking? Not like we do, Ryan said quietly. More like reacting, evolving. The path widened as they entered an old mining chamber filled with rusted carts and broken timber. Snow and frost coated everything, and the ceiling sagged under the weight of decades. Ryan motioned for silence, listening. The air was too still. Karen's grip tightened on Rex's leash. The dog's ears twitched. Then he froze. Nose pointed toward the far wall where the frost shimmered faintly blue. Ryan raised his hand. Lights off. The others obeyed, plunging the chamber into near darkness. Only the soft bioluminescent glow of the blue veins illuminated the space, casting shadows that shifted with every flicker. Dean whispered, I don't like this. It's moving beneath us, Ryan said, voice low. Stay close. A sound rose from the far side of the chamber, a faint metallic scraping, followed by a distorted hum. The frost on the walls began to ripple as if something large was moving inside the rock itself. Alyssa's pulse hammered in her ears. Ryan. The wall cracked open in a burst of light and cold, fragments of ice flying outward. From within emerged one of the hybrids, smaller than the first but faster, its body half metal, half sinew, its face obscured by plates of reflective armor. It shrieked, a sound that vibrated through bone. Ryan fired first, the flash of his rifle lighting up the chamber. Dean joined in, the roar of the shotgun deafening in the enclosed space. The creature darted between them with inhuman speed, claws slicing through the air. Alyssa ducked behind a cart, returning fire as splinters rained around her. Rex lunged forward, barking furiously, his teeth snapping just inches from the creature's leg. The monster swiped, missing by inches as Ryan dove to pull Rex back. Fall back, he shouted. Karen grabbed the leash, dragging the dog behind a pillar as Dean reloaded. The creature climbed the wall in a single leap, claws embedding into the rock, and began crawling across the ceiling like a spider. It's flanking, Alyssa yelled. Ryan aimed high, his shots following the flickering blue veins running beneath its skin. Each hit sparked light, making the creature screech in pain. The core, Ryan shouted. Hit the glowing tissue. Dean fired again, this time striking the creature in the chest. It convulsed, blue light flaring through its body before it dropped from the ceiling, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. The light faded slowly from its limbs until only the faint hum remained. For a long moment, no one moved. Their breath came in clouds, the silence pressing in around them. Karen's voice was barely above a whisper. "Was that one of the others you said was dormant?" Ryan stepped closer, crouching beside the body. The armor was unlike anything he'd seen, grown rather than forged, shaped by instinct rather than design. "They're waking one by one," he said. "That wasn't guarding the core. It was being drawn to it." Alyssa wiped the frost from her face. "How far down does this go?" Ryan stood, scanning the dark tunnel ahead. "Another mile, maybe less. The heat readings will spike near the center." Dean reloaded his shotgun, his voice grim. "Then let's finish this before more of those things find us." They moved on, the passage twisting and descending deeper. The walls began to pulse faintly with light, each beat syncing with the hum that filled the air. The heat increased, their breath fogging less as they walked. The smell of metal and ozone grew stronger. When they finally reached the end of the tunnel, it opened into a vast subterranean chamber, unlike anything above. The ceiling arched hundreds of feet overhead, carved into the natural stone, and at the center of the chamber stood a colossal sphere embedded into the ground, pulsating with blue energy. Thick cables and organic tendrils extended outward, connecting it to the walls like roots. Dean exhaled sharply. "That's the core?" "The heart," Ryan said. "That's where it all started and where it ends." Alyssa's flashlight flicked over something beside the sphere, rows of glass pods, dozens of them, each one filled with motionless human figures, suspended in blue fluid. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Those are people." Karen's face went pale. "No, not people. Prototypes." Ryan's voice was tight. "They were using human DNA, splicing it with synthetic cells, trying to make soldiers who could survive in any condition. They must have failed and buried it all down here." Dean stepped closer to the pods, the faint outlines of faces visible behind the frost. "And if those wake up?" Ryan's answer came like a whisper. "Then Ironwood won't survive the day." He moved toward a control panel near the base of the sphere, the screen flickering weakly under his gloved hand. "I can overload it from here. But we'll need a distraction, something to keep whatever's left of them from stopping me." Karen looked at Rex, then at Ryan. "He can sense them before we can. He'll lead them away if they come." Ryan shook his head. "I'm not risking him." Karen's voice broke slightly. "He's not afraid. He knows what's coming." Ryan hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but you stay close to him. If this goes wrong, you run." No arguments. Dean checked his watch, then looked toward the tunnel they came from. "If this thing blows, how much time do we have?" Ryan keyed in the first sequence. "Maybe 2 minutes before the chain reaction starts. That's all." Alyssa swallowed hard. "Then let's make them count." The sphere pulsed brighter as the temperature began to rise. The walls trembled, the hum shifting into a low, throbbing roar that felt alive. From deep within the tunnels, distant shrieks echoed, dozens of them. Karen tightened her grip on Rex's collar. "They're coming." Ryan glanced back at the glowing core. "Then so am I." He hit the final switch, and the chamber exploded in light as the mountain itself seemed to wake. The mountain roared like a living thing as the core began to collapse, the chamber trembling violently around them. Ryan Hale, the 38-year-old dark-haired Navy SEAL, sprinted toward the exit as alarms blared and fissures split through the walls. Sheriff Dean Callahan, the 45-year-old brown-haired lawman, covered the rear, firing into the shadows as flashes of blue light darted along the tunnel, creatures pouring from the darkness. Deputy Alyssa Moore, the 30-year-old red-haired officer, stumbled as the ground buckled beneath her, catching herself on the cold metal of the wall before pushing forward. Officer Karen Holt, the 34-year-old brunette K9 handler, ran with Rex, the black and tan German shepherd, guiding her toward the faint glow of daylight far above. The air burned with static, every breath thick with the scent of ozone and earth. Ryan turned back once, watching the blue sphere convulse, its glow collapsing inward like a dying star. "Move!" he shouted, grabbing Alyssa's arm and pulling her through a collapsing arch. Dean fired one last round before diving forward as a cascade of debris sealed the tunnel behind them. The roar of the explosion was deafening. Fire and light chased them through the narrow passage, the heat licking at their backs. Rex barked once, a sharp commanding sound that spurred them on. They burst from the tunnel mouth just as the mountain erupted in a plume of fire and snow, the shockwave knocking them to the ground. Ryan shielded Karen with his body as debris rained down around them. For a long moment, all that existed was the wind and the distant thunder of the collapse. Then came silence. The ridge was gone. Where the tunnel had been, only a smoking crater remained, the blue glow extinguished. Dean was the first to move, pushing himself upright with a groan. "You did it," he said hoarsely. Ryan sat up slowly, scanning the sky as the storm finally began to break. Pale light spilled across the valley, the first sunrise Ironwood had seen in days. Alyssa was crying quietly, the sound half laughter, half disbelief. "It's over," she said. Karen knelt beside Rex, running her hand through his fur. The dog's flank rose and fell steadily, his eyes half closed but alert. "You saved us, boy," she whispered. Ryan rose to his feet, looking down at the valley where Ironwood shimmered faintly beneath the thawing snow. Smoke drifted from the sawmill, but the town still stood. "Not just us," he said quietly. "All of them." Dean came to stand beside him. "Think it's really gone?" Ryan nodded once, his voice calm. "It's buried deep enough now that it won't ever wake again." He glanced back at the others, the wind tugging at his torn jacket. "Come on, let's get home." Together they made their way down the slope, the mountain silent behind them, its secrets entombed once more beneath the snow. In the distance, the faint sound of Rex's bark echoed through the valley, not as a warning this time, but as a promise that some bonds never die. If this story of sacrifice and unbreakable loyalty moved you, please share it so others can feel the same courage and hope. Subscribe for more true legends that honor bravery, devotion, and the bond between warriors and their loyal companions. Which moment stayed with you, the seal's determination against impossible odds, Rex's fearless heart, or the quiet strength that carried them both home? Tell us in the comments below. May this story remind you that even in the darkest storms, loyalty and love can light the way. If you still believe that courage and faith can change the world, write Amen in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and may peace and strength follow you wherever you go.